Hello, folks. My name is Michael Cox, and welcome to the Heart Work Podcast. I'm so excited to be back with you. We're stepping into a topic that I'm extremely passionate about. Really, it is the heartbeat of why I'm doing this work. Many of us, we're in the throes of parenting our children in so many different stages of life. We are right in the thick of parenting 3 teenage boys, one who is not out of the house, wait, not there yet. One who is graduated from high school, and 2 others that are entering high school. And so we're right in the middle of it. So we're in the thick of it. So you're going to get to hear what's going on for me and my wife in this moment, but also just to what general we see it's happening. What is that one thing that we're talking about? Parenting from a childhood perspective is what I've coined it to be called, is typically we do a couple of different things when it comes to our parenting. We either attempt to repeat the experiences we had in childhood because our childhood was so good, and you want to give your kids the exact same example or experiences that you had in childhood. Or we do the exact opposite. Maybe you didn't have such a great upbringing. Maybe you didn't have great experiences, and you may make an inner vow or this vow that I am not going to do what my parents did or what I experienced in my childhood. My kids are going to get the exact opposite. I think what's interesting, though, is that we often do this unconsciously. It's not something that we always make a decision to say we're going to do this or do that. We oftentimes step into this. I was having a conversation today with someone, and it reminded me of this concept and begin thinking about maybe fathers in particular, but I also think this is the same when it comes to mothers. But I'm going to talk from a father perspective because I am one, is there's something that happens, right, when it comes to us parenting. All of my life, until the day that Josiah, my oldest son, entered this world, I lived my life as a son. I lived my life from the perspective of a son and experiencing life as a son. I didn't know and understand what it meant to be a father because I was yet a father. Yet I had all my ideals. I can tell you, we were just joking the other night about how I was excited to be a father, unfortunately, probably before I was excited to be a husband. And a lot of that probably because I wanted to change or correct some things. I don't know. But I only lived from the perspective of a son. And it wasn't until that little boy was put in my arms that I began to realize, wow, I'm a father. And I am now going to be responsible for this little person's life and all of what they're going to do. And I will say that there was places where I can remember some things that my parents did I don't want to repeat. Or I remember some things I didn't get to experience that I want them to experience. The problem with that is I was parenting from my childhood perspective of what was going on in my childhood, what I experienced as a child. How fair is that now that I am trying to repeat the same things from my childhood or what I experienced as a child, or trying to do opposite of what my parents did? That's not fair to Josiah, Joseph, or James because they aren't me. They aren't living my childhood. And so we have to begin to realize that oftentimes, and more particularly in difficult times, we begin to parent from a place that what we experienced as children. And you've heard it said a few times, right? You've heard of people talk about how when they have children that they don't come with instructions. You might hear that said, or I've heard it a lot of times in the therapeutic office where people say, I don't know what's going to happen because no, they don't come with instructions. Well, the truth is there are a gazillion. I don't know how many that is. I don't even know what a gazillion is, but there are a lot of books out there around parenting. What I think people are saying is they didn't tell me how to parent my child. They didn't help me understand what's going to happen with my children or my child. And more importantly, we're going to get into it in just a second. They didn't tell me what happens when you bring this other person with some experience and thoughts and how we're going to mesh those things together. I think that's what people are saying. So what happens is they enter a relationship. You develop a baby. We need to go into details of how that's done. But children come into this world and you have, unfortunately or fortunately, 2 people who had completely different ways of growing up. And so you're going to step into this parenting relationship and trying to figure out whose childhood do we repeat. So if you are parenting from a childhood perspective, it's very likely I wanted to do the things the way Michael learned or didn't learn them as a child. My wife, Coloma, wanted to do things the way that she learned them or didn't learn them as a child. And guess what? Those things begin to conflict. And without a plan, what we're likely going to do is default to who is either the stronger or more verbal person in the relationship. But unfortunately, what happens is that opinion or that approach isn't good enough because it may conflict with the other person. So how is it fair to your child if you're conflicting back and forth trying to repeat your childhood? It's not fair. It's not fair to that child, but it's also not something we're going to talk about a little later in the podcast today. Is it's not us parenting. It's not parenting for the two adults who are fully developed in their brain and capable to make a decision about how they're going to parent as the adults with children in their lives that were not them as children. So we're going to look through that and look at it, and also look at what happens when they conflict and decide, how do we decide what to do with that? And we're trying to do some things that may unfortunately be harmful for our children. More specifically, trying to repair your childhood in their lives. You've heard it said numerous times, things like living vicariously through the children. So they're signed up for every activity that there is in the book, or being that loud, overbearing parent on the field when they're trying to play a sport or something like that, and it's more about you than it is about that child. Suddenly, you're trying to relive your childhood through that child. So I think that's one thing, is that we try to repeat our childhood, or try to repair or get something that's not happening. Or didn't happen in our own childhood. The hard part about that is we are completely missing the opportunity to be able to see who our child is for who they are. And more importantly, how do they experience us as the adults in their lives? When you step into this parenting thing, you're right. It's likely there's not a book out there on your child. There's probably not a book out there on your children. But there are ways, and we're going to continue to explore those ways to begin to figure out, how do we want to parent? So a very specific example that I think about, my wife and I remember having a conversation a number of years ago. We were sitting in our old apartment, and we found ourselves trying to correct our boys. We had 3 boys that were very much boys, whether that's a controversial thing for you or not. They were very much boys, wrestling around, fighting, doing whatever they do. And I remember having to spank one of our boys. And after spanking, we both were going through this emotional moment of like, why did we do that? We're talking about it. And thinking like, do we really want to do this? Like, why is it? And it really hit us for the first time, at least hit me. Thought, well, I did it because that's what my parents did. When it came to discipline, my parents, the answer was spanking, more particularly my dad. I don't think my mom ever spanked me. But that's what I knew. And so I was just going to repeat it. But we had to stop and think, is this what's working for our children? Again, I'm going to give you constantly these caveats. Don't take this and run with it. And Michael said, spank, don't spank, or whatever it is. I'm telling you about some experiences. What it made us do is what I'm challenging you to do, is think about, when you're stepping into parenting, how do you allow yourself to self-regulate? How do you get to a place where you really know who you are and how you're engaging and why you're engaging as a parent? The importance is to know who you are in truth. And how do you engage in truth? And how do you both as parents get to the same page? That battle back and forth when I would discipline, I remember another very specific instance with our middle son, and coming out my wife. We all laugh about this today. He's very much like me. He looks a lot like me. We hear that oftentimes. And when I would discipline, my wife say it sounds like it's World War III that's going on in the room, where I'd come out sweating, tired, because he wasn't just that child that was compliant. Our oldest, all you have to do is look at him funny, and he is ready to give in. Our youngest is going to analyze it all, have some few questions, and then figure out a plan. Joseph is just going to battle. And we would battle back and forth. And what I began to recognize was he was bumping up against something in me. Like, am I not a good enough dad because my child's not compliant? Am I not doing it right because he is questioning? Why isn't this kid listening, right? Why isn't he just complying? Because I'm the parent, he's the child. Why isn't he doing what he's supposed to be doing? What I began to recognize is that was more about me than it was about my kid. And so if I were going into the room and I'm going to make him learn, I'm going to make him understand, I'm going to make him know, well, his personality says, well, I ain't going to comply because that's not who I am. And I had to begin following and realizing there's a different way for me to approach it. And that different way of approaching was, the truth about who I am is that I'm a great father. I've tried to be a great dad, and I know that to be true. I make mistakes. I'm not perfect. Any of those things, and nothing this is about perfection. But I can step in differently with my child when I know the truth about who I am. And I'm not trying to prove anything through him. I am not trying to prove my worth and value through him, but I'm able to get grounded in who I know that I am, and I can engage in that. What I would see in my wife when it comes to our next point about us parenting, what I would see in my wife in those moments is it would oftentimes make her feel very uneasy. And she would feel unsafe herself in the circumstances because she wasn't sure what was going on. And as we continue to explore this, and we'll hear more details about that later, what we began to realize is there was some memories about some of her own stuff growing up and how her dad may have approached discipline in their home. And so where I was like, hey, I'm a father of 3 boys, they got to understand what's going on, I'm coming in probably a little too hard, she's experiencing that as maybe a traumatic or difficult thing that was in her own life. And so suddenly we're not on the same page about how we're going to discipline or guide our children. If you can't see it yet, let me help you bring it and make it clear. That was not us parenting together. It was about what was happening with Michael's way, and typically what was happening potentially in Michael's own pain and trying to push away and make something happen in my child because I don't want them to end up like so-and-so, or I don't want my life to be like whatever it might be. So I need to make sure I push in really, really hard to make it happen. That's so less about my son and more about me. And so what we had to do is step back and really think about, well, who are we as parents? Like, who are we as individuals? One thing that we know, and I call this us parenting, and what is us parenting is to realize that there's an us in Michael and Coloma. I bring my strengths, I bring my weaknesses, good, bad, and indifferent. She does the same thing, and we create this new entity that exists between the two of us. That entity will never exist again if we were ever to separate or one of us passes on or when we do, and it didn't exist before us. So there's a very special entity that exists that's only Michael and Coloma. And at some point when we decided to be parents, we didn't sit down and talk about what does our us parenting look like? How are we going to parent as the 2 grown individuals with all of our experiences, all that we've gone through? How are we going to parent our children? And more importantly, how do we parent them individually for who they are? Because guess what? All 3 of our boys, completely different people, different in the way they engage, how they respond. You heard a few examples about that a while ago. So this one size fits all really didn't work either. But being able to realize, hey, how can we get grounded? And how do we do that? Is first recognizing when we are individually, Michael and Coloma, or Coloma, when we are in what we call pain, when we know our own violation of love and trust, and we're trying to fix it. Mine is to try to think, I didn't do well. Shame. Must be something wrong with me, so I've got to fix it. So I've got to come in, I got to control the situation. Coloma's is, all right, he did, she did, there's a blame that happens in there, and hers is to retreat. And we're going to get into more details about that later when it comes to our relationship. And so if she feels that the situation is unsafe, or I feel like I'm not measuring up and being the best dad that I am, I need to come in and prove it. Guess who is the byproduct in that? Our 3 boys. We're not getting on the same page. We're not being able to communicate through what's going on. And now we've got 3 young men, or 3 teenagers now, who are, as we talked in last week's video, are going to be teenagers, and they're going to take the road and they're going to go the direction that they're going to go. We get the great opportunity to decide, are we going to do this differently? Are we going to choose, as the 2 individuals in our house with the fully functioning brains, are we going to create an us in our home, and are we going to parent from that place? And what does that mean? It's leaning into each other in a healthy way. Coloma has some strengths that I know that the Lord put her in my life for, because I have some weaknesses that need some help. And vice versa. There's some weaknesses in my wife that need some help, and God has amazingly orchestrated those things together. And when we're working in this beautiful dance called an us parenting, wow, we have the opportunity to create and to develop and impact some amazing young men in our lives. But if we are only doing that in a place of hurt and pain or trying to prove something, we are only going to get to the place of potentially hurting our young men and also beginning to develop some pains in their lives. You heard me talk about last week a little bit about what's going on in teens, what's happening in teens. And typically in adults, what we're doing is correcting what they experience in their adolescence. Well, think about this. What's going on in your homes is you're getting the opportunity to do one of 2 things. You are either establishing, actually probably doing both, you're establishing pain that potentially they're going to need to pay someone like me later to work with in their lives, or more importantly, you get the opportunity to speak truth into the lives of your children. It's what I want to do. It's what my wife wants to do, is to speak truth into the lives of our children. And if we are trying to do that and we're not landing it very well, we find ways to deal with it. But what I can tell you is, as parents, getting to learn some of these concepts that we're talking about, working on these things and developing this us parenting, you have the great opportunity to speak truth into the lives of your children. And therefore, getting on the same page and learning how to parent your place from a place of peace. Now, what you're probably not going to hear is a bunch of details. I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of how-tos, but what I am going to do is help you understand the importance of self-regulation as a parent. Both of you, if you have a two-parent home, or even individually if you're a single home, is how to parent your children from a place of peace. When you do that, I guarantee you will have a home of peace, and that God will be glorified, and you will see those glorious young people grow up to be the amazing people that you want them to be. So parenting is learning the difference between learning from peace. Is the difference between parenting from peace and not from pain. So let me say that again. Parenting in this process and what we're talking about is learning how to parent from a place of peace instead of parenting from a place of pain, and truly being able to establish in your children who they are and that they're safe to begin to discover those things in their own life. So with that, thank you so much again for listening in to the Heartwork podcast. Remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of those places, and tune in next week for our next conversation. Thanks.